NWA Cane Corso's podcast, where we talk all things dogs.
Hey, Mike ain't on. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Nice Friday night. You could be doing something else, but you're here with us. Today we have a special guest. He's no stranger. Veto Alu of Braveheart American Bulldogs. How you doing, Veto?
Good.
All right. Anything new in the bulldog world?
Nothing. I had a litter of puppies a couple days ago. That's
Okay.
about it.
You had 7, right?
7, yeah.
Okay, that's what's up. Yeah, man. So you're going to do a presentation today on what was that? Selective pressure. What was it?
Selection pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought about it because I listen to you guys all the time. I listen to a lot of different dog podcasts, and everybody is talking about breeding schemes, inbreeding, line breeding, outcrossing, all that stuff. And it's important to understand those things. I've done every which thing you can think of. I've got 13, 14 generations, 30 years of breeding.
Wow.
But the most important thing isn't the breeding scheme. Because you can produce a good dog, or you can build or sort a line and make genetic changes using any breeding scheme. Those are tools, but the most important thing is selection.
Yeah.
Selection, I call it selection pressure. Selection pressure just means that you have a scale of importance. You have a list of things that you select for, and some things are number one, and some things are down on the list. So whatever you put selection pressure on is what you're trying to build. You're trying to set it genetically. Whether you inbreed or line breed, or if you're trying to achieve it through outcrossing, most breeders today, in my opinion, their selection pressure, and of course nobody admits to it, but most breeders, it's about looks, cosmetics. That, if it's not a good looking dog, they don't care about other stuff. That has to be a certain look, certain kind. Show breeders, they will go by what wins in the show, or they'll tell you, oh, I go by the standard, strictly by the standard. And all that stuff's valid, but selection pressure, once you put an emphasis on, is what you're trying to build genetically in your next litter. And hopefully, if you're breeding a line of dogs, you're trying to lock those genetic traits in. So when your dogs are bred to, or you breed your next generation, there's more dogs that meet that criteria than what was there before. I know in American Bulldogs, there's a breeder that used to be a friend of mine and a couple of people, even in oldies, I've heard this before, they'll say, well, if you don't have type, you don't have a breed, which is true. But unfortunately, most breeders today, most people today, they think type is just open up the breed standard and breed how tall they're supposed to be, what their top line is supposed to be like, what their ear set is, what their tail set is, blah, 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 all those things, all those cosmetic or structural things. But in a working dog, honestly, the true to type, when they say true to type, they talk about everything. Like if you have a Cane Corso that is 130 pounds of the most beautiful, heavy boned, big headed, big teeth, whatever, everything that a Cane Corso is supposed to be. But when you slam the car door, he tucks tail. When you stomp your foot, he pees himself.
Yeah.
Is that dog true to type? He looks good.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a grand champion. Maybe he's a supreme grand champion, but it doesn't make him true to type. It just makes him look what people think he's supposed to look like.
Yeah. For
And
example, like I know when I talk to Italian breeders, they they focus on the
uh,
head, the head type, but they mean it in more ways than one, like and how he acts and thinks as well.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. If we go back thousands and thousands of years, uh, they all dogs were bred basically for what they could do. Nobody had the luxury of saying, "Oh, I just have this beautiful dog. He's my baby, and he sits on the couch, or he rides in the car with me." No, you had to go hunting with your dog, and they may have loved their dogs too, but they had to work,
mhm,
and everything was focused on the work, and the work is what made the dogs be considered a pure family.
mhm.
If we look at performance breeds, uh, like show breeds, a lot of AKC breeds, they have all these weird genetic issues and hip dysplasia, or even just weird, uh, strange things, von Willebrand's disease, where they get cut and they bleed out, or cardiomyopathy, where their heart keeps growing till the chambers are so small they die, and just crazy stuff. Like King Charles Cavalier Spaniels, that their skull doesn't get big enough for their brain. A lot of people contribute that and try to say, oh, that's because of inbreeding, it's because of inbreeding, it's because the gene pool is small. It can be because of the gene pool being small, but more than likely, it's because the selection pressure is whacked out. About 15, 20 years ago, I started realizing I can't find a book that I can read that gives me answers, and it gives me concrete anything more than just hunches or opinions, or you know you can talk genetics, you know recessive, all this polygenetic, all this stuff, and if it doesn't practically translate into a good dog, it doesn't mean anything.
Mhm.
So I look at Mother Nature is the ultimate. And what does Mother Nature have? Her selection pressure is, can this wolf live? Can he, despite the weather, despite whatever, can they work in a pack, take
Yeah,
down food, and eat it and survive? Can
strongest.
this? Yeah, it's not just the strongest. It is the strongest, fittest will survive, but it's also the mindset of a pack.
Mhm.
They have to cooperate. That's the strength of a pack. It's a family that works
Yeah,
together. Like in a pack of wolves, you'll have the dogs that can run super fast. You got the big guys that once they catch it, it's caught, and then everybody can jump on it and kill it. Or you've got the leader of the pack. He may not be the biggest, he may not be the strongest. He's probably mentally the strongest one. So
mhm.
all those things are breeding criteria. A good example is about 40 years ago, there was a guy into show German Shepherds, and he was a doctor. So and so, I used to know his name. Uh, he was a doctor of something. He had a PhD,
Mhm.
and he wrote papers on German Shepherds. They're supposed to have a gait called the flying trot,
Mhm.
and that's when all that back end angulation, where the dogs are sloped down so bad. They're supposed to have a 45-degree angle hip angulation, 45 in the shoulder, and they're supposed to slope down. Well, there was never a German Shepherd that looked like that,
Mhm.
naturally. The German Shepherds were pretty much a natural breed. And now you got German Shepherds because of that. They can't tolerate much hip laxity. They have a lot of trouble with hip dysplasia, their hips wearing out. And a
Yeah,
lot of them, you see them, they walk on their back haunches. They don't really set square on their back pad because of that. And it's because this guy who thought, his subjective take was they got to have that slant. They have to have that dropping slant, certain angulation to the hips. And I see it today too. I get people, they read a book and they're like, oh, American Bulldog should have this kind of angulation. And they look at an illustration, and a lot of times it's not of a bulldog or an American Bulldog or anything. And they're like, this is the way they should look. This is what you should select for.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have real steep shoulders, but if you want to see what they're supposed to look like, their structure and all that, look at a coyote, look at a wolf, look at a wild dog. I mean, Mother Nature's done it.
Yeah.
And if you want to look at what a specific breed, like a pit bull or a working border collie, or those dogs, the best working dogs were developed purely by selection for work, for function. There was, if you talk to a border collie breeder 50 years ago, and you said, oh, that dog, he just doesn't have the right tail. He's not true to type.
Mm-hmm.
Or his ears, his ears are screwed up. Or, he's the wrong color, or his coat's not thick enough, or this and that. All these cosmetic things that are actually human subjective ideals of what they think is great.
Yeah, that's true.
Same with if we look at the game bred pit bull, they evolved from dog fighting and bull bait, their ancestor to the bull baiter and all this stuff. All bull breeds, all mastiff breeds, they were used for catching or war dogs or bull baiting or all kinds of stuff like that. We can, everybody can talk about how cruel it is, how horrible it is, but it's just a fact. That's history, and that's actually what gave us the temperament, the drive, the structure, the muscle tone, what's between their skull, what they're thinking. And bulldogs are pretty unique, bull breeds are pretty unique, and that came from being gladiators and being selected completely for that.
Right.
Nobody was walking around saying, well, your dog's blue, so he's not, or your dog is, black. That's not the right color, or this. So if you look at wolves, they don't come in an exact color. There are some that are, certain colors, certain areas, but they'll come in different colors, different stuff. And then on top of that, we took the wolf and turned it into all these different breeds of dogs, and we applied selection pressure there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can start out thinking you're going to create something by selecting certain things, and turns out you, like all these different diseases, when you take a biological creature and you select purely for silly stuff like, a Pekingese has to have a certain waddle, have to have deformed little short legs, or the dog with the great fur around their head is the dog that gets bred a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not pragmatic things, and they go against nature. So you're just heading down the highway to shitville, trouble.
Right.
And that's happens in everything else. In American Bulldogs, it's a fairly new breed. We have 2 types, and actually we probably have 7 or 8 types. Just a variation, which you get a lot of times in a working breed. But everybody has this hill they're going to die on. They're supposed to be all white. They're supposed to be this. They're supposed to be that.
Mm-hmm.
It's politics.
And you've been a judge, and you have judged.
I've judged dog shows all over the place.
Yeah.
And, that's another political silly thing, and you can't tell somebody. A lot of people, they're not ready to hear the truth.
Right.
In Europe, they're always insist on you writing a critique, and it gets monotonous, especially for there's 200 dogs in a dog show. And usually they'll have somebody there, and you start dictating what to write on it. And they're like, no, we want to know. But no, they don't. Because then I get home and I'm like, that Veto, that son of a bitch, he's a liar. He's this, he's that.
Yeah.
That's just the dog shows. But
right.
I mean, there's good things that come out of dog shows too. And there's some beautiful dogs, but the truth is, sometimes the best working dog or the smartest dog or the most healthy dog is ugly. I have supplied a lot of hog hunters with dogs, and they test my dogs. And I have one guy who's a good friend, and he had 2 really good dogs that worked, 2 good working proven catch dogs, and he'd breed them. He bred them together. And his thing was, I'm not breeding anything that's not a proven catch dog that I really like, which he did. So he bred it and he kept pups. And I wasn't paying close attention. And one day I saw he sent me a picture of one of those pups from two of my dogs that was catching a pig. And I'm like, whoa, that dog has a pretty short muzzle and he's got a pretty extreme undershot.
Mm.
And long story short, I wanted to check him out. He didn't live too far from me, so he let me keep him for a while. I thought about breeding to him, and he he went against everything I've ever known. I mean, he's too undershot. His shoulder set sucked. His rear kind of wasn't as straight as I like. He had a goofy tail that curled over his back all the time. He just like he wouldn't do good in the show ring. His
Right.
back was almost too short. And I had a friend that came to my house that I used to know. He used to be big time in the game bred pits, 20 years ago. And he's a dog guy. He knows a lot about dogs. And he was like, what's this dog here? And I thought he was going to say, what's this ugly thing here? And I'm like, oh, I explained the whole thing to him. I said, but he's a proven catch dog. And this guy, he swears by him. Like he's his lead catch dog. He does great. He works perfect. He will catch a hog and then come home and the kids can jump all over him. He's real stable. He's smart. He just got it as far as work goes. And I said, yeah, but he's just kind of ugly. And my friend's like, yeah, but you know what? Nobody told him that he's ugly. And that's how dogs like that, you could build, improve. If you had a Cane Corso that was the ultimate at its job, but it was the wrong color, or it just wasn't big enough, or didn't have a perfect bite, or whatever, little stuff like that, that dog in the long run would do a lot better for your breeding program than this beautiful show dog that's doesn't have anything between its head, or maybe could never work at what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Certain breeds, they have absolute selection pressure. They have absolute, a pit bull, a game bred dog for 100 years, whatever, however long they were fighting dogs. They either won or they lost. And people were betting money, I guess. That's, part of the deal. So it is what it is. No, there's no guessing what happened. It is same thing. Like with racing greyhounds. They either run the fastest or they don't. And it doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter their size, this, that, blah, 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 what George thinks, what the show dog guy thinks. They either they're the fastest or they're not. And that it's absolute. So in American Bulldogs and most breeds, there's not an absolute test. Maybe there is, but if I had to do it over again, I'd love to be more of a hog hunter. I've placed a lot of dogs with hog hunters, but I'm not a hog hunter myself. And I'm too old to pick that up now.
Yeah.
But that would be a pretty good test. And supplying a lot of hog hunters with dogs, I've been shocked sometimes because, you as a breeder, everybody with experience, he becomes pretty good. You look at a puppy and you're like, that showing me little clues of dogs in his background that were really good dogs. And a lot of times they do. They turn out to be what you thought. But until you put them out there, until the rubber meets the road, you don't really know. You don't know till you're kind of guessing. Now, the longer you've been in it and the more you've been through, you're probably a better guesser. But selection pressure, if you had a list, if people were, you say, here, make a list of what's most important, second, third, what you look at. Everybody's gonna say, oh, temperament and health, hip joints and structure, all this stuff. But that is such a bunch of bullshit because most breeders, depending on the breed, they're like an Afghan breeder. They're not messing with no Afghan that doesn't have a crazy coat. The coat is everything. An English Bulldog breeder, well, they're probably the worst example, but if you read their standard, if you talk to the people, it shows that they call themselves a head breed. The head is like 50% of the point scale in judging those dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what that means is the size of the head, the wrinkle, a certain expression of the eyes, and
Mm-hmm.
all that. And it's all grotesque kind of mutations.
Mm-hmm.
And what's all that translated into? The most genetically jacked up dog. I mean, if I had a nickel for everybody that said, "Oh, we had an English, we loved him. Oh, we spent $25,000 on that dog
Yeah.
between replacing his knees and fixing his eyes, and then he needed to be special on special stuff, this and that, blah blah blah." I'm hoping you would hope most breeders that would be the ultimate failure,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so much their culture in those dog breeds is, that's just the way they are. That's just the way a Frenchie is. That's just the way the English Bulldog is. They have breathing issues. They have this issue. They have skin issues. They have all kinds of problems. So you'd hope that the goal is to produce better and produce dogs that can live 10, 12, 14 years without problems, that are positive to their family, great temperament. It's a good dog. Whether you want them to be a watchdog or whatever, you want them to be stable in the brain, and you want all the little things that make that breed a breed.
Right.
Like a German short-haired pointer is a pretty extreme working dog. I mean, a crappy one is probably better than some breeds best. And they have a job, and their job is to point game. And the dogs in those field trials, they work. If they don't work, they don't win. They don't place. Nobody wants to buy pups off them. It's not about how many freckles they got or how long their nose is or if their ear looks right or their tail. It all has to do with work, what it can do. And in breeds where it's an absolute thing, like a greyhound, absolute race, pit bull, fighting pit bulls, they were bred on winners, the winner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can get technically, I'm sure somebody in the comments will say, "Oh, well, there's some dogs that weren't proven that were bred." Yeah, there wasn't. Not all of them were perfectly proven or champions and all that,
Mm-hmm.
but they had some idea. So selection pressure is it's much more important than anything else, really, than whether you line breed, line breeding, inbreeding, outcrossing. It all has a certain goal or certain function, but unless you're selecting the right dogs, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Unless there is dumb luck. I mean, I've had some breedings that I've done that I'd put about 5 seconds of thought into it, and I had a dog that was returned to me actually because they said, "Oh, he's not winning in the shows, and he's just not the type. I want a more extreme dog." And I'm like, "Well, he's only like 10 months old. We'll give him some time to mature." But I took him back because he was a breakthrough dog to me. He just had incredible structure. He had a great attitude. He was just had a million things that I loved about him. And I was so excited to breed him. I pretty much bred him to the first bitch. I really didn't put too much, like I have a notebook next to my coffee table,
Mm-hmm.
and I probably have about 100 of those notebooks. I threw a lot of them away. I constantly write out proposed breedings, at least just for the first 3 or 4 generations. And I kind of try to figure out percentages of a certain dog. I'm trying to lock in some traits from that dog. And but I think of things, I think of every possible thing for success. And this dog I didn't, and it's probably one of the best ever breedings. I mean, it clicked.
Really.
And I'd love to say, "Oh, I planned it all out." It was just my dumb luck or my uh, excitement to breed to this male that I produce. And it's happened to me several times. I've had breedings that I planned. I would waited and waited years to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
two dogs that I was like, "Oh, this is the elite stuff here." And then I'm like scratching my head 18 months later at these pups. I'm like, what the hell?
How
This
many
sucks.
dogs? Sorry to cut you off. How many dogs have you seen that you might have put in homes? You've been like, damn, he got away. Because we can't keep them all. And how
Yeah.
do you keep up with your dogs?
I wish I could say that everybody gets back to me, but early on, I was I was so naive. I thought, "Ah, I don't want to just sell these to pet people. I want these dogs in breeding programs. They're so good." So I would sell to a lot of show people and a lot of wannabe breeders, and really they're some of the most disappointing outcomes because show people are short-sighted. They go to 2 shows when the dog's 6 months old and like, well, this judge said the dog sucks, or the dog is missing this or that, or blah blah blah. It's not this and not that. So they don't have any faith, and they're only looking to win, or if they had produced the dog, then they'll make all kinds of excuses for it. But they bought a dog from you, so they thought, it's like that song. Sometimes I felt like saying it's like that song. Well, you're probably too young. That old song called Rose Garden. It says, "I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden." Well, that's some of those show people are like, I'm sorry, it's all just a roll of the dice. I mean, you get a puppy, it's not going to set the world on fire by 6 months. You got to let it grow up and mature.
Right.
And then I've had dogs. There's a dog across the river in Illinois. He was born, he was all red with a little bit of black on his muzzle. And in American Bulldogs, that's the least exciting color. Nobody likes a fawn or red dog with a lot of color.
Oh.
And unfortunately, they seem to be my best dogs.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And at that time, I knew this puppy was nice. He was real big and real nice. I even liked his attitude. His little puppy was cool. But along comes this pet home that wanted him. So I sold him a pet home. And I ran into those people. Oh, no. I ran into somebody that knew them, and they said, "Man, that dog, he's awesome. He's awesome." They said, "He's 132 pounds." I'm like, no way. People tell you, I used to get that all the time. My dog's 100. I got a guy right now. He's a friend of mine. He's got a dog for me. He's like, he's 119. I'm like, there's no way. He's 9 months old. He's not. I can see him in a picture next to you. He's not 119. And it's just like either they weigh him, they get on the scale, or I don't know. Some people just want to tack 20 pounds on it. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is, but this guy tells me the dog's 130 pounds, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what does that mean? Probably he's not 132 pounds, and probably he's a shitty dog, because not too many huge American Bulldogs are put together good. Well, so then I ran into them, and I'm like, and they said, yeah. We got him out in the parking lot. I ran into it at a Walmart not too far from my house. And they said, we got him out in the car. He's out in the truck, actually. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'd like to go see him. So I'm thinking, some big fat pet dog, he's probably a sweet dog, but he's probably nothing. And I'm like, oh, holy crap. I don't know if he was 132 pounds, but he was big. But not just that, he was structured really good. He was ripped. Like his ass was huge. His neck and shoulders were just bulging. He was cut. He had a beautiful head, big, huge cheeks. He had about a 2.5-inch muzzle that was wide all the way to the tip. His chin was real wide. He had huge teeth. He had everything except he wasn't a popular color. And then I noticed he's neutered.
Yeah, God.
I was like, man. And I was telling those people, I said, oh my God, he's probably one of the most beautiful dogs I've ever produced. And just, maybe it's because he was socialized, but he was just a great, wagging his whole body, I noticed when we were walking to the truck, he was in the back of the truck with a little harness on that had a chain that went down from the bottom of the harness, so he couldn't get out. But people were walking by the truck, and man, he's standing proud, looking a little intimidating, and then he saw the owner, and just starts wagging his whole body and smacking his tail against the window and everything. And then he sees me because I'm with the owner. He's all friendly, just everything I like in my dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had that happen several times.
Oh, yeah.
I've had dogs I placed with people that became, famous, spread all over the world. And it turns out we're not friends anymore. They're, backstabbers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had you name it, I've had it. I've had it done.
Yeah, the dog game is dirty, y'all. Very dirty.
Oh,
man.
I tell you, they say as I've gotten older, I read a saying that said, you're either put on this earth to encourage or you're put on this earth to discourage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've encouraged, maybe it's different in different breeds, but I don't think so because I see all the same BS. But it's just, I don't know what it is with dogs, but other dog breeders, they're just nasty. They're just whatever, if somebody runs around saying, oh, Vito's a great guy, he's this, he's that, he's devoted to the breed, he does it. They're like, yeah. But then they're like, oh, Vito's a criminal. Vito's this. Right away, they'll believe any story.
Yeah.
And it may be, somebody that doesn't like me because I'm outspoken in the breed and it doesn't jive with what they're going for. We have that a lot in our breed. We have a lot of guys that are probably the guys that get the most money for their dogs, breed the most extreme American bulldogs. They want the biggest head, a short muzzle. They just want extreme, exaggerated dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of like that too when I started. I produced some pretty extreme dogs early on, but it's kind of like they're kind of like having a beautiful Corvette. It's really pretty looking. It's neat. You're really into it. And then you start it up and you drive. And by the time you get to second gear, it's overheated and you got to pull over on the side of the road or the motor's going to blow. That's kind of how it is. I see a lot of these dogs. Some of them go back to my stuff early on. Like I had a dog years ago called Blue Ballistic. And as a puppy, back then I was obsessed with producing structure. I as a kid, I was into a lot of different dogs, but the main dog I was into from like a teenager to my 20s was a Doberman. Dobermans. I subscribed to Doberman Quarterly magazine. I traveled to dog shows, Schützen events if they had a Doberman, you name it. And a crappy Doberman is structured better than most American bulldogs. They have all 4 feet point forward. They have good angulation. They have good shoulder angulation, great top lines. They're athletic. So when I got into this breed, most of the dogs were cowhocked. They were sloppy. They had big fat potato feet. Nobody was breeding them. That's kind of how I got interested in being a breeder. So the whole part of, early on was all I wanted was that dog that met my standards as far as perfect structure. And this dog, Blue Ballistic, wasn't it. He was more of the extreme. He was a big, heavy bone dog. He was only about 23 and a half inches at the shoulder. And he was about 114 pounds. And his rear end was huge. His head was huge. Everything was awesome about him. I a couple times as a puppy, I almost sold him to a pet home I had other breeders that wanted to buy him because you could tell he was going to be extreme. But he's structural faults I couldn't look past them. And that's how I was in the beginning. If the angulation wasn't there, if the 4 feet weren't pointing perfectly forward, I wasn't turned on by it. I'm kind of past that now because my dogs have pretty good structure, not perfect, but pretty good. And there's other things, breathing. I like a loyal dog. I want a dog that wants to be with you, and a dog that looks at you like, dude, what are we gonna do, man? What do you want me to do?
Right.
He wants to ride in the car with you. If you let him loose in a big field, he's not going to just ignore you. He wants to. He always looks to see where you're at. He wants to be by you.
You look at all those things, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a little different too. Like a lot of bulldog breeders, Pitbull, English, whatever, oldies. A lot of guys, uh, if they get a dog that growls at people, or they're whatever, you can't touch the car when he walks by, he flips out and all that kind of stuff. Or he only likes your family, he doesn't like anybody else, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I like a bull. I like the old time pit bull breeders that they take their dog to a fight, and then he has no man aggression to him.
Right. Yeah.
Now American bulldogs have man aggression. For a good one will have a stranger man aggression.
Mhm.
I would hope that they would put on more than a threat display if something happened. But that,
Right.
I don't want a dog that. And there's a lot of American bulldogs like this, that they just fire up on
Right.
people for no reason.
For no
You
reason.
know,
Yeah. 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 I don't want to. Yeah. I don't. I'm not into dogs like that. Neither. I want them intelligent enough to always recognize what is and what is not a threat.
yeah,
Uh,
you want them to be smart. I
right.
want my dogs to go on a hog hunt, catch 5 hogs, be on 5 catches. He may be covered with blood and have his vest on and he's tired, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he comes home, I want him to be as docile and sweet with kids or his
Yeah.
family. And I don't expect him to just fawn over people that walk up to him for that he doesn't know.
Oh
But
yeah.
if I'm
Yeah.
home and I'm there, I don't want him to get spooked or act skittish or be, aggressive,
Mm-hmm. Let
because
me
there's
ask you this.
no reason.
Right. What are the hardest when you talk about selection pressure? What are the hardest traits to maintain in your expertise?
Uh, Consistent temperament, breathing, uh, structure in American bulldogs it's not easy to maintain. But probably the most important thing is the function and the temperament. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
not saying, oh, I produce every other dog has a bad temperament. I have dogs that somebody else might get them and they think that's the greatest dog. They socialize the crap out of them. It's just me. So I can't, I wish I could, but I can't, I don't have the time or the staff to take every puppy and socialize it perfectly, to go to puppy class and take them out
Mhm.
to different places 5 times a week and do this and do that. So in some ways, that even if I did have a staff of people to do that, uh, it would probably be a little detrimental, because if I can and I've done it, I've taken dogs that they haven't been on a leash. They maybe they went to the vet to get the rabies shot at 4 months, and that's it. They hadn't ridden in the car. They don't wear a leash. If I at my house, I have 8 acres, and everybody has a huge yard, and I'll take them out of their yard, let them run in the woods with me for a little while or something like that, and walk with that. But I don't put them on a leash. I don't. Sometimes I don't have any that are leash trained, but then I'll take them. I had a dog, my dog Jack. Uh, he was born like right after my divorce. And actually, I had a friend of mine whelp that litter. And then it went into wintertime. And I was working so much, and I moved to this new place, putting up fences and all that. I did no socialization, like zero. He'd never been off my property. And up until he was 6 months old, I was really probably the only person he saw, besides when he was real small. He saw my friend and who whelped the litter and their kids. And I was dating this girl, and she's like, "Oh, here in St. Louis, they have a Mardi Gras parade, and they have a dog. It's a dog Mardi during Mardi Gras. They have a dog parade, and I'd never been to it. And she's like, "Oh, can we take one of your dogs?" And I thought, well, one of my dogs was older. The most socialized dog was older. The female, one of the couple of the females I had that had puppies a couple months earlier, their boobs were hanging. I'm like, I'm gonna take. So I grabbed this dog Jack. He was about 2 years old, and I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna work. I knew his temperament. I knew he wouldn't freak out or anything. I took him to that parade, and I'm telling you, in downtown St. Louis, it's a sea of people. Like
Oh boy.
there's like thousands. Every sidewalk is 7 people deep, and
Oh
you got
yeah.
to move. And on top of that, then you got people with these dogs in dog outfits, costumes, and just the most bizarre place. We could have landed in another planet. He came out of the woods. He didn't know nothing. I gave him a bath. I put a fancy collar on him. He did great. He
Good.
was like zero stress. He was a dog aggressive dog too. Like he took about zero dog aggression from anything. So I was so paranoid somebody would come up and fire on him. But little dogs, I mean, he loved people naturally. So he loved anybody that would touch him or pet him. He just loved them.
Hmm.
But I was like right there watching close because I don't know what he was going to do. I don't know if a siren would go off and he'd just flip out. He had every right to. He didn't know what any of that stuff is. So what that tells me is this dog's natural temperament is way better than typical. Because
Yeah.
typical dogs, if they're not socialized, they're going to freak out.
Yeah. I do the truck stops. The truck stops is a good place for me because it's not a lot of people, but it's a lot of noise and moving
Oh yeah,
parts. Yeah. So yeah,
a lot
I
of
like.
weird smells. I mean,
Mhm,
if I live out in the country and
mhm.
you go from the woods to a parking lot at a quick trip or truck stop or something,
Right.
you might as well be going to a different planet. They
Yeah.
don't know. And a weak tempered dog, they're going to freak out. They might shut down. They may try to run. They may tuck its tail and piss themselves.
Mhm.
You'll see that. And some people would be like, well, it's not fair. You didn't socialize them. Well, you're right. It should have been socialized and all that. That's a perfect ideal thing. But if you can take a dog off a chain or out of a kennel in the woods and he's used to seeing 2 or 3 people and then he goes to all this crazy stuff and he's great. And I've had several dogs like that. Uh, when you sell pups to people at 7, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, and the dog lives in a home, especially if there's more than 2 or 3 people, and they take them to the ball game with them, they take them to this kid's practice, blah blah blah, and they got a great temperament and they're outgoing and wonderful. That's good, but it's not as much information as when you take a dog that's not had socialization and
Right.
he's great.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I have a dog right now, Sumo. He I don't I think he was like 18 months old and I put a leash and I was delivering a puppy. I was meeting somebody who was picking up a puppy and I put him in the car. He adores me. Like he is such a weirdo. Like and if he looks at me and you look at his eyes, his pupils are the shape of a heart. Not really, but I'm just saying when he sees me, I'm it. That's
Mhm,
it.
mhm.
He wants to be by me. He looks at me, just thinks I'm the greatest thing. I took him on a couple trips and he was great. Like he didn't really lavish affection on the people that picking up the puppy, but he didn't wasn't mad at him or anything. But he as long as he's with me, he's happy. He's cool.
Right. Right.
And like he wasn't socialized. I could if he wasn't a red dog that's not popular, I'd have taken him to a show or something, which I never go to shows, but
Mhm.
he won't embarrass me. I wouldn't be embarrassed. Now his grandpa, my dog Clyde, he was socialized quite a bit and stuff. He actually went to a friend of mine who's a big trainer, and he put uh, just the kind of beginning stuff for bite work, rag work, and all that kind of stuff, drive building. And but by about 4 months, he was like, I started trying to do obedience with him, and anytime I give him a slight correction, he shuts down.
Mhm.
And he said, I don't think he's going to work because he wanted to do PSA with him. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll take him back. And I gave him another puppy, that puppy did good. But so I had this dog, Clyde, and I just took him everywhere with me. And I started doing the PSA because we have a place close to my house called the Tom Rose School. They train trainers. And so I go there and he did everything. And pretty much he was my constant companion. At that time, I had this old Toyota minivan that I took all the seats out of. It had like 200,000 miles. It was like my dog car. And it just had a passenger seat and nothing. It was like a cargo van. I took all the seats out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that dog went everywhere with me. He was like my kid,
No,
which I don't I haven't been that close one-on-one with the dog probably probably in 15 years. When I had to put him down, it killed me. But he was like a human. I mean, I could talk to him and say anything. I could take him anywhere in any situation, even off leash.
mm-hmm.
And eventually I took him. I did do the obedience just because I was lazy and I wasn't going to pay nobody, thousands of dollars to get him titled in PSA. I would, if I had thousands of dollars, I probably would have, because I had trainers that wanted to buy him like crazy. And I always thought, well, has he got a good temperament? Because he had early socialization, because my friend took him at 6 weeks. And my friend is the top tier trainer in the country. And those dudes, they went him at 6 weeks. And they do all this stuff that they call, it's imprinting in their young brain.
Mm-hmm.
Just drive building, bite work, all that rag work and all that stuff. So Clyde had all that stuff early on till 4 months. And then I continued the bite work and all that stuff. But I never did obedience, although Clyde, by the time he was 5 years old, he knew, get in the truck, stop, get over here, don't do that, you little asshole. he knew all. He had a huge vocabulary. He actually knew. I could tell him stop. Hey, no, get in the truck.
Yeah,
and he'd jump in.
it's amazing.
So I don't know if it was because of the early training or if it was just natural. But that's Sumo's grandpa, and actually his daughter Tink, who is Sumo's daughter. She was kind of like that too. I used to have a neighbor that had these big goats, and he fenced apart for them, but I don't know if it was fenced in the back. But anyway, they got out all the time, and they're always at my property. And they're big goats, like they're some kind of combination goat, but they're pretty big. They're a little bigger than a dog. Mm-hmm. And I used to take Tink and Clyde. They'd ride in the car. They were my house dogs. So I'd go open the gate, I don't think anything of it. And here's these two goats. And of course, Tink sees them and grabs the big one by the horn. And I immediately scream at Clyde, get him. I get him in the car, which you're talking dogs that have extreme prey drive. And Clyde'd been on a hog before. He catches, he'll catch. Mm-hmm. And I pretty much, once I got her collar, I could get her off that thing. I could call her off, which I couldn't do that with most of my dogs that need a breaking stick.
Right.
And it wasn't that she was half-ass, she was the real deal. She had crazy prey drive. And so it's American Bulldogs, the old timers always talked about, these dogs, they don't need a lot of training. They're pretty smart. They're this and they're that, And that you get that occasionally, and really that's the kind of stuff we need to breed on.
Right.
There's a lot of, in the old days they say that the dog didn't work, after a couple of times, a little bit of training here and there, they move on. They get another one.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. It's that kind of selection pressure has an impact.
Let me ask you this. So I was talking to a breeder the other day, and everybody, you should have a breeder or two friends, buddies. You just get on and just talk about dogs,
Yeah.
And he said, you should make your males. You shouldn't buy them. You should make them. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I started and breeding my first litter in 1994. I bought a huge male that I had, two females that were half sisters. Well, I bought a bunch of dogs, but those, and then I had a female Broadzilla. Those four were the ones that made the cut. Back then, the cut was they passed elbow and hip x-rays. I liked their temperament and they looked good. That was pretty much my cut. But I've had people offer me studs and this and that, blah, 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 to these hot dogs and all that stuff. My motivation has never been, I want to buy the coolest dog, I want to breed it. That's what gets me going is, producing. I haven't bought a dog. I have bought some dogs in the last 10 years, but I haven't bought a stud or any of that stuff. And I would breed to a dog. I mean, I've done outcrosses to people, but I always, there's a couple different kinds of breeders. There's breeders that, there's breeders in American Bulldogs that are, the oldest breeders of the dogs. But if you read the pedigrees on their dogs, it's like they're starting over. They may have 3 generations, 2, 3 generation, 2, 3 generation. They aren't building a line per se. They were just trying to make good dogs. But the problem I see with that is it's taken me a long time to learn my gene pool, to learn the strengths and the weaknesses and what's lurking in there and what I got to try to get rid of. And for me to just buy stuff, of course, you ask people like, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have problem? How? And they're all like, oh no, my dog's perfect.
Yeah.
My dog's that. And some of them are probably good. Some of them suck. Some of them, there's a guy years ago. He was a real nice guy in California. He produced a dog that he paid a ton of money to get his Schutzen 3 on the dog. And he's pretty famous. He was bred to a lot of dogs. And the guy he's a pretty honest guy, real Christian-y dude. And I used to talk to him. He's not a breeder anymore, but he would tell me, I had trouble, I've had trouble because I've sold dogs off of that dog and not all the time, but I get some dogs that are they're too much for the people to handle. And I've had a lot of dogs returned because they bite people for no reason. So and that dog's in a lot of pedigrees. And I'm not saying he's a bad dog. Anybody can produce problems, here and there. But here you got a dog with a Schutzen 3, and he's to newbies that read pedigrees or talk to different people. He's an icon, all these working dog people have him at his thing. But to me, it's like, I don't want that shit. I don't want a dog that will bite indiscriminately.
Yeah.
To me, sometimes they have a screw loose. Sometimes they're a little bit of a fear biter. Sometimes they're just dumb. I don't want a dumb dog. My worst nightmare is having a kid get hurt.
Yeah.
There's every year there's statistics of dogs killing people, and then I don't even know if they keep track of those numbers, but there's dogs that hurt people, maul them or whatever. I don't want anything I've ever produced to do.
No,
I mean,
that'd be
maybe if somebody broke in the house and was beating somebody, but that's rare.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, I do. Yeah, that'd be a nightmare to ever hear or about some dog off your line that mauled somebody. That's nuts.
Happened. I know years ago there was one of the fathers of the breed produced a dog, or it was from his line. I don't know if he produced a dog, and it wasn't the dog's fault, I don't think, but he killed a baby, one of the owner's kid. It didn't. I mean, it was the parents' problem. I think parents' fault more than the dog, because they had a 3-year-old or something, and it was out in the yard and it got tangled in his chain. The dog doesn't know if he jumps it and pulls the chain. I guess it crushed the kid or choked him or something. But to me, that would be a nightmare. I don't know if I could recover. I don't know if I'd breed dogs.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Don't want to hear it. I've had a lot of dogs that, and I worry about a lot of people. Now I seem to have a rash of these young professional people, apartment dwellers from Chicago and New York that want to go to these dog parks and, or I've even had, uh, I have had this happen a couple times where the neighbor's cat got in the backyard. One of their little kids screamed on the swing set, and the bulldog runs out and breaks the cat's neck. Or I've had uh, I've had this similar thing happen 2 or 3 times where I've had the guy's gone and the wife's home alone, and somebody knocks on the door at a weird time, and she doesn't think. She opened the door, and the dog saw that she was startled, and the dog jumps out. And one time, one of my dogs ripped the guy's pocket off his jeans as he was trying to run up the porch. And I've had people call and say, "Oh, do we have to worry? Is the dog crazy?" I said, "Is he acting crazy still? I mean, is he trying to bite somebody?" "Oh, no, he's acting normal." I said, "Well, he just thought he could sense that you were freaked out, and he knew
Right. Yeah.
Daddy's not home." A lot of these male American bulldogs, they think the mama is their pride, their little girl that they need to protect.
Yeah, that's good though.
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that part of it. And
Yeah.
kids, I forget it. I've had so many people call me and say, "Oh, my husband yelled at our kids and the dog got in between them."
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, they will. Yeah, they will. Let me ask you this, Vito. This is a note I had took on selective pressures in nature. Selective pressures such as food, abundance, health, predation, temperature, and mating can influence which traits are favored or disfavored in a population. What? How could you test? Well, I think I know how you're going to answer this, but how do you test those things as a breeder? How do you act as Mother Nature as a breeder?
That's if there's anything to learn to become a great breeder, it's that. And there's not a clear-cut answer.
Yeah.
There's not a perfect test. I mean, like I was saying before, game bred dogs, it's pretty absolute.
Mhm.
Hog catching dogs, you can't train a dog to go in and catch a pig.
Mhm.
You could maybe get a domestic pig and you know, but out in the woods, uh, you can't make a dog do it. You can't. It just some dogs. I have a dog right now. She's actually a breeding dog. Her hips and elbow are great. She's got great everything. She's a wonderful dog. She's got a great temperament. She's not dog nasty, nothing. Well, she started out life with a hog hunter friend of mine, and he just raved and raved and raved. And then she got to be about 12, 14 months old, and he started catching pigs with her. And she did great. She went in, caught, held, but I don't know what it was in her head where after a while, he had Catahoula's, or not Catahoula's, blackmouth cur bay dogs.
Mhm.
And uh, when you're catching hogs, the bulldog is usually a lead and catch dog. They're on a leash, and your
Mhm.
bay dogs find the pig, and then once they find it, they bay it, which means they just run in circles. They may nip it its rear, but they don't catch it. They don't have the
Yeah. Keep
they
them
don't
at
have the
bay.
bulldoginess. Yeah, they keep them at bay, and then
Mhm.
you're watching on the GPS, and you let your bulldog go. But what happens is once a bulldog gets there, a good bulldog, he's just going to run right in with zero hesitation and slam it and grab a big mouthful of the ear or the jowl and hold it. That's what a good catch dog does. He's not fighting the pig, he's catching it, holding it. Well, once he does that, all those hounds, they get real courageous and they get catchy,
Mhm.
which some hog hunters, they don't use bulldogs. They use little Jack Russell, a little Jag Terrier, Yog Terrier, whatever they call it, or a Patterdale. They're not big enough to hold the pig, but they'll let it go. And those crazy sons of bitches just grab a pig. And once that thing grabs, those bay dogs will catch. And if you got 5 bay dogs or 3 bay dogs got a good hold, uh, that pig's caught and you're safe to dispatch it or whatever you're going to do to it. But so this dog, my female Onyx, she catch. And then after when the other dogs got on, she was like, okay, she'd go sit down and watch.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing to have for a catch dog. You want them never to let go. But my friend was like, he just thinks, hey, well, these other idiots got her. My job's done.
Right.
So I got her back because of that. But I want to use her because she's just an incredible dog. And she wasn't a cur. But was never afraid of it. So catching is kind of an absolute test. And same thing, but that's the rub. That's how do you know? I mean, there's some breeders out there that they've been around the dog so much. I like to think of myself that way too. I've seen it all. I've been around all kinds of these dogs, and I can, in my own dogs, I know, hey, that reminds me of that dog. This reminds me of that dog. You can see it sometimes in their actions, their mannerisms, and there's certain combinations of reactions that you're like, yep, I think that dog's got it. Of course, but you never know till the rubber meets the road.
Right.
I had a dog that I thought was such a strong temperamented dog. She was inbred off that dog Jack I was telling you about. She was ugly as sin. She didn't look like nothing. And I eventually I bred her once, I think, and then I put her with the hog hunter. And I happened to go on the hunt with him the second time maybe that she caught. And she was doing, I'm not an expert, but she was doing things and I'm like, oh no, she's not going to do good. He can't like what she's doing because she would get in front of the pig and rebite like she was fighting, trying to get a better gripper, just trying to beat the pig up, which that is not what you want to have done because I don't care how big the dog is, he's not going to beat up a wild boar, even if it's a 70-pound little piglet. It's got razor sharp little teeth, and if it gets a chance to slash, it will slash. So this stupid dog, she would just get right in front of it. But my friend was like, oh no, she's a great strike dog. All my other dogs jump on. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't want to breed that and reproduce that kind of stupidity. So everybody has different things. And you could never have told me that she was like that. I knew she had a good temperament. I knew that she was tough, but I didn't know she'd be stupid. And that's being pretty much being stupid. I don't know. I've had people tell me that a lot of game bred dogs, some of them, if they're 35 pounds or so, that's not, or 40 pounds, it's not a big dog for holding a pig. Although there's a lot of guys that have them that, they get two of them on a pig and they're fine. But I've heard some of those game dogs, they don't care. They want to fight the pig. That's not what you want in a catch dog. You want a dog that will run in and hold no matter what and not let go.
Right.
And never rebite and have zero self-preservation. They don't care about what's going on or how they get slammed against something or they get hurt or cut. Their whole thing is to hold and catch. And it is the weirdest thing that just like, you'll get a dog like a Labrador that takes the water. It's just in their genes. They jump in and just swim fantastic. And you'll get some American Bulldogs that they see a pig for the first time and it's like, holy crap, who taught them or how did they know to just grab a hold? You can see it's instant. It's almost, I had a dog, Taz, he was an outcross dog. And he was kind of a tall, rangy type. He's like 100-pound dog or 90-pound dog. And I had a friend in Kentucky that he got into hog hunting bad. And to his wife she was going to divorce him if he didn't stop doing that. That was all he wanted to do.
Right.
So back then he had caught a bunch of pigs and had them in a big yard. And they're wild boar. Some of them were like mixed wild boar. And, this was 30 years ago. There was no laws or anything. So he called me up and said, we're going to have a couple people out if you want to try your dog on a pig. So I bring this dog Taz out, 9 months old, and he was half standard. He was where I got my black dogs from. I bought a black and white female from a guy in upstate New York, Gail Raponi. And so he was had a lot of hog hunting dogs in the background, this and that. But his father was my dog Go Ballistic, who was just extreme bully dog. He had prey drive and all that stuff, but he didn't have the radiator to handle the heat. So I thought, oh, I'll bring him. I brought 2 other dogs. They caught, but this dog Taz, 9 months, and I never seen a hog before. I never did anything like that with him. We took him, and it looked like, first time we let him go, it looked like he had a super magnet attached to his mouth, right on the hog's jowl. And I had some hog hunters that were like, well, you want to sell him? You want to say, you don't need him, silly boy. And that dog was incredible. And he, not only that, he lived to be almost 15. Of course, my friend, I retired him with a friend of mine who doesn't have any kids, and that was like his kid. And Taz probably needed to be put down at 13, but he lived to be 15. He wouldn't put him down. Like the dog would cough and he'd poop, he couldn't hold his bladder, and he was kind of partially blind and all that stuff. But my friend, he put a doggy door in, changed a room in his house, and did all kinds of things. And finally he realized, oh my gosh, he's not going to get better. He's just suffering. Right. But anyway, that dog was the first one I saw that was like, whoa, I thought he'd fumble around a little bit. Like, what am I doing with this thing? No, it was like, it was in his DNA to run in there and grab this pig. And unfortunately, there are some that just don't get it. They never get it. They just don't have it.
Right.
I wish from 30 years, every dog had been tested on a pig. Maybe I'd be a light years ahead of where I'm at now.
Right. Yeah. Hey, Vicente, I want to see, he put an answer. I take all my dogs to the games, to restaurants, etc. They're great, just don't touch unannounced. He got my dogs.
Oh.
Yeah, he got some of my dogs. Yeah. I know which ones he talking about off this certain mom I got. That's how she is. She don't play about.
Yeah, I know. I guess I don't know a whole lot about Cane Corsos. I know years and years ago, I got a call from a guy from Italy, and I forget the Starloni or something. He had a pretty successful Neo kennel, and that was when the Neos were going to be accepted into AKC. And I guess he saw me somewhere and saw that I was Italian, so he called me. And he's speaking Italian, like, I'd like to send you a dog if you want to do this and do that. And then he was explaining temperament to me about the dogs and saying that the Neo in the old days, the Neapolitan Mastiff or the Messino Neapolitano, they used to keep them, they were courtyard dogs, and they'd keep them in the front courtyard of their house. And when guests come over, they're supposed to be good. No, don't mess with them. But when there's not guests there, they have no affection for anybody except their family. They're kind of like Sicilians. They're friendly. They're friendly when they need to be friendly, but if you're not their family, they don't really give a shit about you. But he was telling me that now if it sends you a dog, you can't get rid of it. You can't, because these dogs don't adapt well to another home, another family. They're very loyal to their family, and they will never accept a new owner when they're full adults, which I thought was weird. But I never really liked all that lips and all that stuff. So I would think Cane Corsos, to me, it seems like Cane Corso is probably the working variety of the Neo from 100 years ago or whatever.
Oh yeah.
His Neo was 100, 200 years ago, whatever, or 100 years ago. They didn't look all exaggerated. They look more like a big Cane Corso.
Yeah, even in the 50s and the 60s photo, probably even later than that before they started changing into breeding on that recessive, heavily wrinkled, unhealthy kind of, dog. I don't think they live worth of shit right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, they used to be a different. Somebody came on the show and he made a good reference. He said the Connie Corso is a Neo's bastard child.
Yeah. Probably the Neos from that they're talking about are probably a lot more specs of what a good working type Connie Corso is now.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely, most definitely. Yeah. So, any um any tips on? So, like, we got a lot of guys in here that's hobby breeders. Where you don't have a lot of dogs to access, do you have to have a lot of dogs to be a good breeder, Vito?
No, I mean, everybody has a different goal. My goal was to produce a line of dogs genetically bred type that even when they're outcrossed, my dogs' genetics pull through. And I also have had goals and goals and goals of improvements. That was kind of the motivation for me getting into the American Bulldogs is I thought it's a new breed and I could see there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed and made better. So I'm different. I'm extreme, crazy, whacked out. I mean, I used to have 20, 25 dogs. Uh, I used to do breedings, and if the puppy I kept was not, I mean, I still am like that, but the puppy wasn't had faults or things that then I just find a home for it. And so, yeah, you could do. I mean, if you live, you're limited, but unless you're willing to raise dogs, have puppies from them, and then find them homes, and then to move on to the next generation, if you can only have 4 dogs or something, 3 dogs, I mean, it just depends on your goal. Are you wanting to produce an awesome dog, but you're not concerned about locking in the genetics to make a potent stud or a potent female that can really throw her genes?
Mm-hmm.
Are you just wanting to win a show? Are you wanting to make a working dog? There's all kinds of different things that people want to do. But to build, to make a change, to build a line of dogs, you kind of need to keep stack generations. I used to get accused of, oh, you're just worried about stacking generations. That's the only way you get genetic change, and the only way you can lock anything in is you got to breed them. Then when something's successful, you line breed it, you inbreed it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In American Bulldogs, I was at a huge disadvantage because we have 2 different types. The Johnson type, bully type, they're great dogs. That's what I try to breed, but um, they have a lot of issues like breathing issues, structural issues, and in the last 30 years, everybody and their brother that gets into them is like, you know, this one's got a big head or he looks cool, he's got big cheek muscles or whatever, and he becomes popular. He's cool looking, and then they breed that, and it nobody's really trying to correct the breathing. The American Bulldogs have breathing issues because Johnson, and not just Johnson, but probably more people. Uh, to me, an American Bulldog, I don't. Nobody knows the exact history, but I think what it is uh, the Spanish brought the Elant here. The Christopher Columbus brought these dogs. You can read stories and look up at artwork. It brought these dogs that were called the Elant. It wasn't really a breed like we think of a breed today. It was a type.
Mm-hmm.
So from the paintings and the pictures and drawings of the time, the Elant looked like somewhere between a game bred pit bull, a doggo Argentina. Some of them looked like just straight up greyhounds. They were used. Well, they were catch dogs. They were basically the forebear to all the mastiffs and working bulldogs, but they weren't. They were just bred for the work, and they were bred for thousands of years,
Mm-hmm.
even going back northern. They originated from northern Africa, from a nomadic tribes called the Alanis, and these Alanis were master dog breeders and master horse breeders. And they were not only that, but they were great horsemen. Like when they fought on the back of a horse, and
Oh,
they
right.
could, and not only that, but like the horses they produced were war horses.
Mm.
They were heavy, big, thick horses that were bred to have the temperament to run into battle. I don't know if when I was a kid, there was always they would come to town, these Austrian Lipizan stallions. They're white. I don't know if you ever, they
No.
used to, when I was a kid, they used to have them, they'd show these, commercials with the horse walking on its back feet, the guy's got like a reins on it and doing all
Oh,
these
yeah, yeah.
weird things.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And then they would train them to jump in the air and then kick their back legs out in the air.
Mm.
When I was a kid, I was like, oh, wow, they're like circus horses or something. I didn't know. Well, years and years ago, my friend, she has like 5 kids, and her daughters were into horses. And I saw that they came to town, which I haven't seen it for years. But when I was a kid, I always saw Lipizan stallions. So we all went. And it was kind of fucking boring. I was like, what is this? What are they doing? It didn't make any sense to me. They didn't give any explanation. They did a couple, they rear up and then they kick back, but a lot of it's weird riding, their riding patterns and stuff. Well, about a year after that, I was watching a PBS and they had a thing about the breeding program in Austria of these Lipizzanner stallions, they call them Lipizzan. And basically, they explained that that's a war horse. That's what those Alani tribesmen had. And those maneuvers were needed to make a war horse. So if you're fighting and there's people with horses or people all around you, you train that horse to kick back and knock people's heads off. That's what they were doing. They rear up, stomp somebody, kick back, and kill people. So these Alani tribesmen, they originated from North Africa. They traveled all along upper North Africa, all the way around up into Spain and back. And everywhere they went, they kicked ass.
Yeah.
Because they had superior horseman ability. They could fight on the back of a horse. They also had horses that were war horses. They could go to war with you. And then they had these big ass dogs that they called them Malants. They were war dogs. So that dog you cut somebody, you stab them, whatever, he'll run up and break their neck and chew their face off, or jump on somebody else comes in with a horse and grab that horse by the nose and make them flip. They're war, and they would go. They're nomadic tribes. They just move, with their herds of animals, and these things protected their goats or sheep or whatever they had. That breed is kind of the forebear to everything, to the boxer, the Great Dane, to the Cane Corso, to anything. And that everywhere they went, people would see these big working dogs. Well, everybody want to breed to that. They throw their bitch out there and heat.
Yeah.
Get their beagle hooked up with that big old war dog. Well, Christopher Columbus brought a shit ton of them here that were trained. And unfortunately, they killed natives,
Oh, wow.
North. Then not only that, they tell stories. I mean, it's written stories that they would eat these poor Indians, these poor natives.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I guess they were like in the Caribbean, that part of America.
Yeah.
First.
He was, a lot of people know he was pretty malicious now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. When I was a kid, they used to be like, oh, Christopher Columbus is Italian. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I think he was Portuguese. Because he was a son of a bitch. He did horrible things.
He was a motherfucker, boy.
Yeah. They say that some of these native people would have all these gold adornments, gold and stuff. And he's like, gold, that's what we need. Of course, they were part of the Inquisition where they, kill people. They thought anybody that's not a Christian has got to convert or it's just a savage. And they didn't have as much they thought you were an animal. You weren't set. You're a savage or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look it up, Christopher Columbus, war dogs, there's famous paintings
Yeah.
of these Spaniard guys just standing there in these tutus looking, like these, they have those weird outfits.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these dogs mauling these poor natives. They're laying on the ground. Some of them might look like a dog of Argentina. Some of them looks like a big game bred pit, and some of them look like a heavy boned greyhound.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just eating people. They're killing people.
Yeah.
So that those dogs came to the United States. The Spanish had uh, forts and settlements in the wilderness here, and so there is some of that in there. But I would say most of the American Bulldog probably comes from all the importation of what the dogs that became eventually the American Pit Bull Terrier,
Mm-hmm.
because they brought them in from Ireland. The fighting dogs from Ireland usually were rangier, little smaller, racier looking, that had mainly colored up dogs. And then the English dogs were mainly piebald whites, and some of those could get 60, 70 pounds. So the pit bull game dog breeders today, or not today, but probably in the last 50, 100 years, it wasn't uncommon. They'd have some of those guys would have. Well, you can ask Schoolboy. He
Schoolboy.
probably know
Yeah.
more than me, but they may have some of those dudes may have a yard of 100 dogs, all out on chains. They
Oh
raise
yeah.
them up. They raise them up, and then they test them at a certain age. And if they're not game, they get rid of them. And you might have a ton of dogs. I know I read somewhere some breeder said, you might have a 12% success rate if you're lucky back in the old days. Well, what they would do, they'd test the dog. If it didn't test good, they either put it down or they found a home for it. So I think the American Bulldogs, the bigger dogs that were 50, 60 pounds, that's catch weight. And catch weight pits, even back in the day, there wasn't a lot of American Pit Bull Terriers that size, and there wasn't a lot of other competition for you to have a match. So there are not a lot of people matching those dogs. Most of them are 30 to 40, upper 40s. If you get 60, 70 pounds, that's huge. So I imagine a lot of those dogs, they gave them to guys that owned ranches or had a need for a catch dog.
Mm-hmm.
And then they became kind of a thing. I mean, down south, even after the war, it was kind of like, I got me a big white bulldog that rides in the back of my pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there was no papers. Nobody, matter of fact, I get some of the old timers are like, you'll ask them, hey, where do these dogs come from? What are they? Like, I don't know. They've been here forever.
Yeah.
Like, well, one guy, I have a friend of mine, Kimmery Lewis. He grew up in North Carolina, and he's into dogs. He's not breeding as much anymore, but he told me one time, I'm going back home to visit my brother, and he said, there's a guy that when I was a little kid, he and his dad, they had catch dogs. They had tons of these American Bulldog type dogs, white bulldogs, and I'm going to go see him. The guy's 86 years old, and I hear he's still got some dogs. And he said, man, I just want to check them out. If there's a nice one, I might buy one.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, hey, when you go there, ask him, what the fuck are these dogs? Where they come from? This 80-year-old guy said, well, I don't know. They've been here forever. He
Mm-hmm.
said, if we breed some and they don't catch good, we might take them back to a pit bull terrier. He said, if they don't have the wind, we might use some of the bay dogs, like a plot hound or a blackmouth cur.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we work it back and forth that way. And I think that's what happened. I think some of those dudes are like, hey, Georgia's got one of them white bulldogs. Well, I got a puppy off of this and that. Guess what? I'm going to breed it to a Great Dane. I'm going to breed it to something big. And
Yeah.
I think even English bulldogs, they bred them to English bulldogs because actually my friend Kimmery said, the guy said, yeah, every once in a while I heard tell they go back to a pure English. And my
Mm.
friend was like, what? An English bulldog? These old guys are hunting hogs. But if you think about it, we're talking the turn of the century, 1920, 1870s. what was the English Bulldog like back then? Taller, not quite as extreme, because they had to. Nobody had air conditioning. Nobody was going to do a C-section, I don't imagine. Could you imagine it, in the 1800s, somebody saying, "Oh, my dog's about ready to have a puppies. I need to go get a C-section." They look at you like you're nuts.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
those English Bulldogs that were maybe crossed in early were different than what we have now. Now Mr. Johnson, worked with David Levitt. David Levitt got two females to do breedings with an English Bulldog. That's what kind of started certain lines of his Levitt Bulldogs. And I ended up finding out that he gave Mr. Johnson all the dogs he didn't keep. And Mr. Johnson took a couple and crossed them right in and pretty much line bred off of that. Today, most of these bully American Bulldogs are about 25% that West Camp's High Hopes, that AKC Bulldog. So that's why we have a lot of breeding issues.
Yeah.
Maybe in the old days they would have bred away from it because if you couldn't work, then you wouldn't get bred again.
Right.
But now we got like about 25 years ago, I remember guys were like, "Is a puppy undershot? A 6-week-old puppy, is it undershot already?" And I'm like, "No, it's even, but that's normal. At 4 months they lose their teeth, they'll get a little undershot." And they're like, "Oh, I don't want him because he probably won't be bully. He'd probably be standard looking." And they did that over and over, and then you just keep pairing up those dogs because everybody wanted a dog that looked like Johnson's dogs that were 1 or 2 generations off that English Bulldog. He called them the machine line or the sugar doll line. Those early dogs, there was a dog called Mean Machine, a dog called Red Machine. They were like the grandkids or great grandkids of that English Bulldog.
Oh,
several
really?
line bred several times, over 25% most of
Oh,
them.
wow. You want to take a few questions?
Sure.
Okay. Hey, I want to say hello to the chat. I seen you. Let me give you guys some shout outs for the history. Doug, Dickie Foster. Hey, Dickie. J. Diz. Elite Connie Corso. Furs American Bulldog. So Asiatic Soldier. What's that, brother? What are your thoughts? Hold on. Let me put it up here. What are your thoughts on the alfalfa blue blood bulldog?
Alapaha blue blood bulldog.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Years ago, I talked to the lady that started those. What was her name? Lana Lou Lane. She sent me a video too, and it's pretty awesome. A pretty awesome video. She was funny. Well, she worked with Johnson too. Like she got a lot of dogs from Johnson. She's from I forget, Alabama or Georgia. No, she was from Georgia, a different part of Georgia. And she told a story that her grandfather, I guess he was a German, and he was I remember them saying he was very odd. He was 6'6" or something, which is very odd at that time, the 1800s for somebody to be that tall. And that he always had a white bulldog with him. And he always called him Otto, which is German for dog. And so she wanted to preserve that dog, which is pretty much the same thing that Mr. Johnson did. They were wanting to preserve that white catch dog, white certain type of well, they weren't all white, but some places they call them white English, some people they call them hill bulldogs. Johnson, the first name he gave him was American Pit Bulldog. But it's the same thing. Now her dogs early on, you could tell down south that also there was a lot of people that bred pit bull and American bulldog types to Catahoula for these Catahoula bulldogs. And they used them for catch work or any kind of work. And they wanted I read an article years ago, this guy talked that he didn't like the purebred bulldogs. He liked half and half or combination. They call them Catahoula bulldogs. They're actually kind of popular or fairly common down south. And he said he wanted it because he wanted a little bit of let go. So, a lot of bulldogs are straight pit bulls, and even straight good American bulldogs, they're not going to let go of the pig unless you have a breaking stick.
Right.
So this guy would cross them with the Catahoula, and he said they made better trainable dogs that were a little more practical, they let go when he told them to. So that's what Lana Lou Lane had. Her original dogs, there were probably some Johnson dogs, some whatever, common white bulldog. And because she had Merle and she had those glass eyes that you get from Catahoulas. And I think she died. She was kind of an alcoholic. And uh, I don't think her dogs really took off big time. And then uh, maybe 25, 30, probably about 30 years ago, I advertised a litter, and this guy called me from California, and uh, I don't know the guy, but I think he was kind of a little bit of a con guy. But he took that breed. She was still alive back then, I think. But he took it and did all kinds of crazy stuff with it. Put more English bulldog, put American English combination in there, and then he got some other stuff. And he bred pretty. What was the name? Cattle Rustlers was the name of this cattle. But he kind of repopulated. When he called me, I was like, I know this guy's full of shit because I have a Bull Mastiff book, and in the Bull Mastiff book, they had this picture of this cool looking bulldog, and it was from England, and I think the dog's name was Geronimo, or maybe the Cowboy Line or something like that. And it turns out that dog was a Staffordshire Bull Terrier bred to an English bulldog, but it looked kind of like a real bully American bulldog. It was a cool looking dog. I have a book, I forget the name of it. It's Bull Mastiffs and English Mastiff book. And he's in there. And well, this guy took that picture out of the book and put it up on his ad in Dogworth. And I asked him, I said, what is that? And he goes, oh, that's what my dogs are bred off of that Cowboy Line, the Cowboy strain. And I'm like, you're full of crap. That dog was from a long time ago, and I doubt import.
Schoolboy
anyway,
about shit like that happening all the time in the dog game.
Yeah, he became kind of popular, way more popular. He was a promoter, and he produced some pretty unique looking stuff, like chocolate brindle dogs with blue eyes, and I think some of his dogs were pretty. I think Lana Lou Lane's dogs were pretty good working dogs, and I think he produced some pretty nasty working stuff too, like some pretty extreme dogs as far as temperament goes. But it took off quite a bit, and that's now I don't know. That was 20 something years ago. I don't know what they are now, but they're kind of like a form of a country bulldog, like an American bulldog.
Gotcha. Vicente Moore is asking. This is Rock Corso Instagram. Rock Corso.
Oh,
what is his ideal weight for a catch dog?
I'm not a expert for sure, but just from what the old timers tell me, there's a guy that he was a character, and he early on he actually produced some really good dogs. His name was Bill Heinz, and he was from Texas. And I remember he was one of the first videos I bought, first people I talked to on the phone 30 something years ago. And he was quite a character, but he had a really good video that explained a lot of stuff about the traditional bulldog, what it should be like. And he would talk about, I don't want it to be dog nasty. My dogs ain't dog nasty. You don't want to catch dog that's dog nasty because you don't want him to grab a hound instead of the pig.
Yeah.
And he would talk about all this stuff. And then he had this big, huge stud, and he actually bought his half brother and then his nephew. And he was a pretty famous dog that actually turns out he was half Johnson. But this guy, I don't know if he didn't know or if he really tried to cover it up. I'm not sure, but he tried to say the dog had just a little bit of some Johnson dog in him. But anyway, that dog's name was Country Boy, and he said he was over 100 pounds. And I've had people tell me that, oh no, I saw the dog, he was probably 115, 120. And so he says, I don't want I don't want to catch dog much over 100 pounds, because once you get to a certain size, you lose a lot of heat tolerance and a lot of stamina. nowadays I have some hog hunters that are like, oh no, I don't want a dog. I don't want a big dog over 80 pounds, 70, 80 pounds, because he won't fit on my four-wheeler. You know, they can't shove a big 120-pound dog into a cage. I don't think size, I don't think they have to be small to be good catch dogs, but I
Mhm.
think it's just practical. You know, they had a lot of these dudes have side by sides with cages in the back, and they put their catch dogs in there in the back of the pickup truck, and they don't want to deal with a giant dog. It's too big. And it's probably true. You know, once you get 120, 130 pounds, unless it's proportionate, unless the dog is like, you know, 28, 29 inches tall,
Mhm.
uh, he might, you know, it's like if you're a bodybuilder and you're 5'5" and you're 200 pounds, you probably aren't going to be a marathon runner. You're not
Right.
going to eat, you know. So
Yeah.
there's some, I've heard some people say I don't want to catch dog much over 60 pounds. I've had other people say I got to have one that's like 75 to 85 pounds. Otherwise, the hog will run off with them like an ear in his ear.
Mhm.
So I don't think there's an exact size or weight.
Mhm.
I know there's a lot of doggo Argentinas that are humongous, big old giant dogs, 120 pounds that people swear by.
Yeah.
But I would think the ideal weight, if I had a guess, would be anywhere from 75 to 95.
Mhm. Right. It'd be that'll be good and strong enough. I'm gonna take one more question, guys, and then we're gonna be getting close to the end here.
All
Uh
right.
Vicente Moore, at what point in your program? Oh, that's a big question. At what point in your program do you line breed and what point do you outcross?
Well, I've done it. I've done everything. I've outcrossed, I've line breed, I've inbred. When I started, my first two breedings were a very distant line breeding. They were basically Johnson, 7/8 Johnson bred to a 15/16 Johnson. So they're pretty, you know, same family dogs. And then uh, I got this female that uh, I thought at the time she was pretty amazing. She had great hips, great conformation, incredible muscle. She was pretty extreme. And I found this dog that was her exact type. And at that time, I had not seen her type. I had seen a lot of American Bulldogs, but I didn't see any that were her physical type, her proportions, her muscle. And then here I find this dog that didn't live too far from me that was exactly like her. He was just a male version of her. They almost had the exact same pen hip, and they had the same crazy muscle. Like they had zero body fat and huge slabby muscle. That male, my that female was my female Broadzilla. The male was a dog called Mufasa. Mufasa's like he was bred like crazy. My friend Kenny bred him to everything and anything. So it's not uncommon to see him like 15 times in a breeding in a somebody's dog's pedigree.
Mhm.
But anyway, I wanted to breed those two together. I tried. I tried maybe three times. And then I had this female. She was the first bully champion in the country. And she was like 3.5, and I hadn't ever had a litter. I kept taking her, taking off work, driving to my friends 5 hours from my house. Spent one time I spent like 5 days there, and I progesterone tested, did all that stuff, but he wouldn't tire. He couldn't tire. I think she was too manly and he maybe wasn't turned on. I don't know. They were both too muscle bound or something. They just couldn't tie. And
Yeah.
so I had to do artificial insemination and it never took, never took.
Oh.
So I was like, oh my God, I got the greatest female. That time I thought, she's so awesome. She's got everything. I got to get a litter off of her. So I took her and bred her to her nephew that it was at a friend of mine's house, just 20 minutes from my house. And at that time, nobody nobody had done not in bully Johnson type dogs. Nobody that I knew of had ever done an inbreeding aunt to nephew like that. And actually, the guy that owned the nephew was kind of a friend of mine at the time. He was a big breeder, started a couple years before me, and I go there. We do it. He ties her, and I'm walking up the hill from his kennel, and I'm like elated because I'm like, oh my God, we gotta tie. She's gonna have puppies.
Mhm.
And we're walking up, and my friend, and my friend at the time, we're not friends anymore, is a guy named Jeff Daly, and he actually produced that female. He had her nephew, and he he he's he wasn't a very good friend, but he was walking up the hill, and he looked over at me and just started laughing.
Mm.
And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And he goes, I can't believe you just did that breeding. You inbred on that. You inbred on that dog. He's, at that time he thought, oh, if you were to inbreed, well, he never inbred, but he thought, he thought my female was a hybrid because 25% of her was painter, or no, 1/8 of her was painter. And painter was a totally different bloodline than the Johnson dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So that litter was the first litter I had from her. It was inbred. It was my first inbred litter, and it was phenomenal. Phenomenal. I can't say it produced her. I didn't produce her because she wasn't bred real tight. Her father was a half and half. He was half painter, half Johnson. Yeah, no, he was 3/4, quarter painter, 3/4 Johnson. And he was a big extreme dog. I didn't get anything like him. I didn't really get anything exactly like her. I got similar dogs. I got some really good dogs. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Daly started doing inbreeding. So I did the inbreeding with her, and then I did a second inbreeding to a different nephew. And then I did kind of an outcross, loose line breeding. And then her last breeding, I bred half brother, half sister off of her and produced a really nice male I had called Groucho. And I bred her to her double grandson. So I did inbreeding in the beginning. The reason why I outcrossed is because at that point I didn't realize these dogs have breathing issues. I believed everything Mr. Johnson and all these old timers were telling me that, yep, they catch hogs, they'll do this, they'll do that. Well, these 25% English bulldog dogs that are the common bully American bulldogs, now they might have the grit to catch them. They may have the gameness, but like I said, it's like having a Ferrari that you get in and you get into second gear and it overheats and you got to pull over. What good is all the horsepower? What good is gameness? What good is ability? What good is the right attitude if you don't have a radiator to keep going? You can't cool yourself. So at that point, I'd done those two inbreedings, and I had a dog. I sold these people on the East Coast, and I became really good friends. Actually, that dog was off that dog Mufasa, bred to another one of my females, and he was a beautiful freaking dog, gorgeous. And the people were a little younger than me, and they had two kids, like 7, 8, 9, something like that. And it was a great home. They were becoming really good friends of mine. They, send me pictures and all kinds of stuff about them. And that dog was they go to work and they leave him in the backyard. They have a big 6-foot privacy fence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I forget where they live, Virginia, I can't remember, but they had a backyard where the neighbor had a garage in the back right up against their fence. And they went to work. They didn't know, but when they went to work, they put their dog out. They didn't know the neighbor had a roofing crew that was ripping the shingles off the garage and going to put new shingles on and re-roof it. Well, that dog barked all day, went nuts because these people are right above his fence, a big crew of guys are ripping shingles off. The kids come home from school before the mom does. They go in the backyard and the dog is dead.
Overheated, right?
He overheated, blood's coming out of his nose. And that fucked me up.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, you produced a dog, these kids come home and they see their beloved dog and they love that dog.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm sure that traumatized those poor kids.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, oh, fuck. Well, at that time, my dogs, I lived more in town. And I built on the side of my garage a kennel, like a shed that had 6 kennel runs off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it had air conditioning, it had heat, it was insulated like a refrigerator. And I lived in suburbia. I had a big yard, but I lived in suburbia, so I had 6 runs. And then I had a lot of my dogs lived in the house. And So I didn't hunt. If it was, I'd take my dogs and do stuff with them. If it was 90 degrees, I'm not going to run in the park with my dog. So I didn't know. I trusted what everybody told me that, yeah, these are badass type, catch dogs and country bulldogs at work. But they were, they had 25% or more English bulldog in them. And an English bulldog is the most uncapable, low heat tolerance dog there is.
Yeah.
And so now I'm faced with a new dilemma. How do you improve breathing? How do you change the gene pool? I've already inbred. I've already got, you know, really noteworthy dogs. I was known for people loved my dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you do that? I don't know. So I had a friend in Mississippi that he started out in the breeding these standard dogs called Man of War. They had a lot of color. They were either solid brindle or solid red. Sometimes they were white, but they were. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's just a giant pit bull," which maybe it was. I don't know. They were known in Mississippi, in Louisiana, as excellent catch dogs, and there always was a rumor that that Man of War dog was in the journal, which I don't know. It's probably bullshit. Nobody's ever shown me a article that he was in the journal, but there was supposed to be this Man of War dog that was a dog that would fight in the pit and was a champion.
Mm.
So anyway, my friend started out with those, and I didn't think I thought back then I was like, oh, that does look like a giant pit bull, not a good one either. And um, my friend Jack Robinson, he used to advertise in Dog World. He was retired, and he talked about back then. He said we didn't have white bulldogs when I was a kid. We had brindle bulldogs, just like these Man of War dogs. So he loved those dogs and he bred them and sold them. And then I guess he realized, hey, these people all want the Johnson type, the bigger Johnson types. I'm going to buy a Johnson type. So he bought a Johnson type, but it was really a 3/4. It was related to my female, this big dog he had called Okie. So he started breeding this Okie dog to all these big Man of War bitches that he had and produced some unbelievable fat rears, big dog. He had a big dog called uh, Bigfoot. Bigfoot was like 25 inches and 135 pounds.
Wow.
He had huge bone.
Yeah.
And he had a big head like a mastiff, and he had a long muzzle, and it came out and had a bump on it. I drove to Mississippi to check the dog out. And I was really impressed. I was really impressed with his temperament. He was a little dog. He was a little more absolute dog aggressive, dominant, but he wasn't outwardly stupid. He wasn't like, yeah, I got to get this dog. But if another dog got in his path, he would destroy it. And he was great with kids, great with people, and he was impressive. I mean, he had an ass like a rhino. He was just thick. And he was actually my big dog's cousin. And at the first, when I started out, I wanted to breed that huge dog, which I did breed him, but I changed direction when I had that dog Broadzilla.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I thought, hey, he's half Man of War. Man of War dogs are good hog hunting dogs, and they talk about that Man of War dog was a pit dog or champion or some crap like that. Well, I'm thinking, well, they must breed pretty good. So I'll try that. It's kind of related a little bit. So I'll try that as an outcross. And at that time, I thought, it's easy. I'll fix it. I'll outcross and then I'll breed back to my stuff and it'll be gone. Didn't work that way. Then I thought, you know what? I need to try different. After that outcross, I need to try different outcross. And I saw this dog in Dog World that was black and white, looked really neat, real cool looking dog. And he was black and white and he was doing all this stuff, hanging from a rope and biting a sleeve. And he was all mainly standard blood, but he had that Bill Heinz blood through this dog called Combat, which is a country boy's daughter. And so I talked to the guy and I'm like, do you know how to send semen and this and that? It was a guy, Gail Raponi. He had a kennel back in the day called Tough Enough Kennels. And he's like, I knew right away. He's in upstate New York. So it was about a 22-hour drive or 25-hour drive from my house.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't do that. I said, can you ship me semen? And I could tell he'd never done that stuff. It would probably be tough. And then he said, hey, you know what? He had a dog named Bishop that I wanted to breed to. And then he said, hey, I got his daughter I want to sell. So he sent me a picture of her, and I'm like, yeah, all right, so that'll work. I bought her and used her as an outcross. That was that dog Taz's mother. And so then I tried breeding her and thought, which she did. Taz, my dog Go Ballistic wasn't a dog I'd ever taken to the woods because I don't think he could handle the pig. I don't think he can handle the heat. And his son did that one generation. So I'm like, oh, cool. I solved the problem. And I tried to breed that, outcross and slide breed it back to him. And I kept going back. And it took me 15 years. I tried several other outcrosses to standard American Bulldogs. None of it. I mean, it would produce dogs in the first generation that were better breathing. And I'd lose the look of my dogs, or this and that, which it was fine. I thought, fine, keep it, and then I'll breed that. And I produced some really good dogs, but I genetically never changed my gene pool until I could reduce till the percentage of standard dog reduced that English Bulldog below 25%. And so now I have dogs that are. I have some dogs. I have a outcross, my subline. I have a breeding I just did. The two dogs are about a year old that I kept off of that. I think they're 13/16 standard. They're only 25% of my core blood, but they're thick and they don't look like a standard dog. They look thick. They look like a bully dog, but they don't have an Englishy flavor to them. They have just a blocky head. And then my other line, once it got, I did calculations going all the way back just to that one English Bulldog, and I reduced it at 12.5% or lower. And then those dogs seem to reproduce the better breathing. It seemed to be more ingrained in the thing. Whereas before, I'd produce a good one, I'd produce two good ones, I'd breed them together, and I produce shit breathing dogs that were not good breathers.
Right.
So, when to do it? God, there's a million things. I mean, if you're breeding German short-haired pointers, I mean, shit. That most of those dogs are pretty sound. You're not and trying to improve something like breathing or structure or athleticism, so there's probably things to do. So that kind of a dog would be different. If you're breeding old English Bulldogs or bully type American Bulldogs, roll up your sleeves, you're in for some work, and then I don't know, the best time to inbreed is when you got a dog that's truly superior. You think it's truly superior. You never know till you breed it or inbreed it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some people.
That's a big subject.
It gets quite a bit. It goes back to selection pressure. If you're lining up selection pressure to I tried to do breathing early on, and it was hit or miss until I got to a certain percentage of that blood. Now my goal is to take this subline and work it back into my core blood and really try to ingrain those traits and produce my type, but keep the Johnson blood to like nothing, little to nothing.
Right.
Where it's minuscule. Because what I'd like is if I can produce a dog that bully people can breed to that will improve their shit. And it sounds kind of arrogant to say improve their shit, because what is improvement? What I'm talking about is breathing, functionality, temperament, structure, muscle, good hips, stuff like that. Stuff that I don't think many bully breeders are concerned with. They just think they're just, a lot of the guys are just like English Bulldog breeders. They're like, that's the breed. That's how it is.
Yeah. Not trying to make it
outside.
Yeah. Well, Veto, I got to go get these kids in order. And
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. That was
Of course,
great.
we're gonna have Veto back for another one because he's been in the game a long time and he has a lot of knowledge. Veto,
Yeah, I
you have
keep trying
anything?
to catch your lives with Schoolboy.
Yeah,
I always have I love watching. I watch a lot of his stuff. I forget he did an interview with, I forget the guy's name is Mr. Gray. I've listened to some of those 2 times.
yeah. And Schoolboy, some of my favorite videos about him and a guy named, I think it's Hunter Man. Man, they really be going in. But I got a show with him tomorrow at 8.
All
Yeah.
right, I'll have to put it on my calendar so I can get my question in.
All right, brother. Okay, man.
All
Veto,
right,
thank you so
it
much.
was a
Sir.
pleasure. Thanks again.
Likewise. Okay.